Oh, they're all gonna hunt and a draw.
Are we all going to be invited?
No, figures.
None of us are going to.
Just family and one professor who's been here for me the whole time.
What's your major in?
Political science, but I found out I have a minor in government and American history.
You didn't know that?
I remember what?
What is that? Airport you? Airport you are. What's the difference?
There's no difference. They had a minor in it. And
I'm in lunch and.
I didn't know, I knew I had a lot of classes, like I knew I was one step away from the minor and one from poli sci, and I didn't know that I accidentally had this. I know
All right,
exactly.
well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. If we could invite everyone to take their seats. We have many wishes to offer. Margaret?
Yes.
We have many wishes to offer to everyone today. First of all, to the entire crowd, I wish you all Moadim L'Simcha.
Thank you.
Moadim L'Simcha is the appropriate greeting for the middle days of Pesach. You don't say Chag Sameach on the middle days of Pesach because it is not technically a Chag today. Chag is only the first and the last day or days, depending on how you observe, where it's a full festival where you abstain from all the work that one might do. But in the middle of the week, you offer the greeting Moadim L'Simcha. You can remember this, by the way, and save it for use at Sukkot as well, where the greetings are the same. Well, so I would say to you, Moadim L'Simcha, and the appropriate response to the greeting Moadim L'Simcha, and this is where it gets fun, Margaret, you ready, is Chagim Uzmanim L'Sasson. So I say Moadim L'Simcha, and you repeat after me, Chagim Uzmanim L'Sasson. May you have meaningful days and times and festivals in joy.
Did you write that for
I really can't right now, I have other things to do. It's in the blessing. In addition to the greeting I offer all of you on this intermediate day of Pesach, today is a very special day. How special is it? It is Spencer's 29th birthday. Now, I normally say it's the 29th birthday for people of all ages. That is the official magic number, that when I offer birthday greetings to people of any age, I say 29. But in this essence, in this moment, Spencer is 29 for the first time. So we say together, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Spencer, happy birthday to you, Yom Huledet Sameach, Yom Huledet Sameach, Yom Huledet Sameach, Yom Huledet Sameach. I'm not going to make him skip around the room. I'm not going to make him spell his name with his butt, which is what they do at one of the camps. We're just going to move forward into our learning. At 6 Point Sports Academy, the kids get up and have to wiggle their tushies and spell out their name on their birthdays. If you want to know about it, ask Eleanor Josephson. I think she's responsible for that. But we are going to get into more deep and meaningful experiences. We're going to jump back into our learning of Jewish wisdom from Benjamin Franklin. I see no newcomers, correct? Anyone here for the first time in this month?
Oh, it's second time.
Second time, right? We've got no newcomers, so we can jump right in. I can skip over who was Franklin and who was Menachem Lefin and the comparison of the attributes. We've seen the pictures of the little books that they each invited us to make, making note of the ways in which we transgressed the particular midah that we are looking at this week, and we can jump right into learning. So please join with me in the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe. You make us holy by giving us commandments and command us to engage in words of Torah. If you don't have a name tag, we'd like you to have one. They're over there in the baskets. For those of you on the screen, you have your name tags. Hi, Bobby. Hi, Philip. Hi, Steve. Good to see you on this Tuesday afternoon. And I figured, since one of the midot is order, stay there in Hebrew, it's only fitting that during this week of Pesach, we explore what it means to hold order in our lives, to hold Seder in our lives, as devoted Americans and as devoted Jews. right? We know that the meal that we celebrate on the first night or first 2 nights of Pesach is called a Seder. Why?
There's an order.
Because there's an order of things, right? There's the 15 rituals that you perform in a particular order. Kadesh, Urchatz, Yachatz, right, exactly. Magi, Motzi, Matzah, Korach, Shulchan Aruch, all that good stuff. Who finished their Seders? Who returned after dinner? Who's saying who knows one? Well, you can't finish the Seder before dinner. You got to come back after dinner. You got to do Birkat Hamazon. You got to have 2 more cups of wine after dinner. You got to say next year in Jerusalem. You got to sing. You got to sing Who Knows One. You got to sing Adir Hu. You got to sing Chad Gad Yah. And then you have to finish with some matzah at the very end. Either what's on the table, or the afikomen, or all the crumbs underneath when you clean up. It's all there. So that is one element of Seder and order. But of course, the word Seder and the idea of order comes from a lot of different places. We have other books in our tradition that come and use the word Seder, right? What's the name of the book that we pray out of? A Siddur, right? A Siddur, a Siddur comes from the same word, because the prayers in the Siddur are presented in order, right? We do not do things willy-nilly in our tradition, as we are going to learn from our learning tonight. All right, Bobby, I know you can't hear us. I fear to tell you it's on your end, not ours, because Phil and Steve can hear me just fine. My advice to you is to try to check your volume and your speakers. I'm sorry to tell you that.
Did she hear you say it?
Probably not. You're right. Spencer just pointed out that Bobby can't hear what I'm saying about it, so I'm going to put in the chat what I just said. All right. I'm sorry, Bobby, but I think it's an issue with your computer. Everyone else can hear me. They have told me so. Try turning up your volume or changing your speaker. Smiley face. No, wrong one. Smiley face. Okay. So Franklin, in instituting for us a sense of order, or perhaps orderliness in our lives, says, let all of your things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. What is he telling us?
Be organized.
Be organized. Good. Say more. Jump more.
First rule of management, handle everything once and put it in its place.
So touch it once and put it in its place. Good. Good, Spencer.
Make specific time for everything you have to do.
Make specific time for everything that you have to do. And I think that there is a corollary to that, which is not only should you make specific time, but all of your time should be set aside for a particular task. From the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you go to bed at night, you should know in advance how you're going to be spending that minute, that half hour, that part of the day. That a well-organized person has a time for everything and has all of its time set aside for something. That's a lot much. Javon.
Never stop learning.
Now, so there's a time for learning, right? Make time for learning, right? I'm reminded of the teaching that says, don't say I will study Torah when I have time, because you'll never have time. You have to set aside a time in keeping with the teachings of Franklin, and we'll see Lefin as well, that if you want to study Torah, you have to decide in advance, I'm going to study Torah on Tuesdays from 12 to 1. Congratulations, everybody. Yeah, dude, Ruth, please, go ahead.
I was thinking, just not wasting time, that too.
Well, not wasting time is an outcome of what Franklin suggests.
What it does.
You gotta speak up louder, Margaret.
Everybody tells me that.
Well, they can't hear you.
Okay, I think what it also does is it keeps you calmer, and it has when you are organized and you have things in its place, you've got it all done. You're calmer You're not, there's no angst usually.
So I'm gonna say, so Margaret says that when you're well organized, it can keep you calm. It can, right? Because a lack of calmness comes from, I don't know where something is. I don't know when I'm going to be doing this. And that for some people can be anxiety provoking, right? If, you know, everything in its place so that when I know I need something, I know where to get it. Of course, now, challenge can be that if my thing is not in its place where I'm supposed to be, because someone moved it, that can also be anxiety provoking. And by the way, I didn't set aside time to go looking for the thing that I need right now. And now it has disrupted both my physical order and my temporal order. And that is frustrating. This happened to me on Sunday when I was preparing for Seder. We often do a lot of our cooking for big meals on our barbecue. Because A, it tastes good, and B, it keeps the oven free for other things. And guess what I learned on Sunday afternoon when I went to light the barbecue to cook the meat for Seder? It was out of fuel. So I got in the car. Now, thank God, there's a gas station on our corner that has LP tank exchange. So I figured, all right, I'll be back in 10 or 15 minutes. No big deal. And I get to the gas station. What does the guy say to me? We're out. All right. So it's only 10 more minutes down the road to Home Depot. And they have self-service. I can be in and out. And I was. But that was a half an hour I didn't plan to use on Sunday in preparing for the Seder. We still pulled it off, okay. All right, so Franklin says, let everything have its place and divide and make sure that each of the things that you need to do, let each of your part of your business have its time. Also, don't multitask. Right? If each part of our business has its time, I am not doing two pieces of business at the same time. That is multitasking. Just as a warning. Lefin says, all your actions and possessions should be orderly, each and every one in a set place and at a set time. I think he's copying. Let your thoughts always be free to deal with that which lies ahead of you. The second part is interesting. What is he warning us against by saying, let all your thoughts be free to deal with that which lies ahead of you? Spencer.
If you're spending your time thinking about what you have to do, because you didn't make time for it, or you're worried about it, you're gonna forget the things that you need to do going forward in the day.
So one is you're going to forget what you need to do. That's a piece of it. I believe that it's absolutely right, and that Lefin is saying something even more direct, which is, Fran?
You have to be ready for the unexpected.
So being ready for the unexpected is an important piece of this as well. But I think that what Lefin is saying is that when I'm concentrating on a specific task, I don't want to be using my mental energy wondering where are my scissors and what time is my haircut, right? That if I know where my scissors are and I know where my haircut is, as I am making the chicken, I don't have to wonder about those things. And having an organized mind and having an organized home and having an organized schedule allows me to be fully present on whatever task it is at hand. Nirvana.
And back to differ a little, is in the days when it was written, there was no computer, so to speak. And all these mathematicians develop all these ideas using paper and pen. Nevertheless, those mathematics and physics that have been put in place now is through computers, and it's a lot of multitasking that is creating these changes every 3 months, something new, and it's by virtue of that. So it seems to be working because many jobs are being taken over by, say, robots, until the individual catch up to the robots. So it's going to be multitasking that brings them up to speed.
So I don't think there's a conflict here, because I don't think Franklin or Lefin are talking to the computers. The computers allow us to divest ourselves of certain tasks and responsibilities, and perhaps allow us to even load in multiple tasks to be performed simultaneously by the computers. But the human mind is differently capable than the computer. Franklin and Lefin are saying that unlike computers, which are impossible to distract, the human mind is easily distractible. And so it takes this practice to keep ourselves from getting distracted and focusing on a single task at a time. That task could be, I have to load in these 15 tasks into the computer to perform.
I like your analysis, very quick response.
Thank you. Thank you. And then Spencer.
I think there was a lot of multitasking when Franklin and Lefin were around, especially for Franklin. Remember, he was rich. He rode everywhere in a carriage. He could easily read or do paperwork while he's riding.
But he wasn't driving,
That's a good point.
right? Like, and the point is, oh, I have correspondence to do. I'm gonna do that correspondence as I'm riding in my carriage from First Street to Sixth Street, and he's using that time. But what he wasn't doing was working on 2 projects or 3 projects at the same time. All right,
This is
We
what
can't
I-
address.
please stop apologizing.
When I'm praying, from the sea door, sometimes, right, your mind could go
Mhm.
in a million places,
Mhm.
and you have to realize that, you know, concentrate on what you're reading and saying, and.
Yeah,
I
is
don't
it,
know
is
if
it
that's
easy,
like-
Ruth, is it easy to do that? Is it easy to hold concentration?
No.
No, which is why Franklin and Lefin say this. This is not because it is easy, it's because it is challenging. They are setting for us an idealized way of behaving, right? Mussar is about aiming towards an idealized way of doing these things. You are not going to wake up one morning and keep every single thought process organized in a particular order of sequence. But this is just a thing to work for. So when you're working on Seder for your 2 weeks as you're working through your book, you're trying to keep things organized, and you will note the times when you have let other things get in the way of the thing that you're focusing on at the time. But let's get into the way that Lefin pulls apart what this means. When a person is in a deep sleep, his animal spirit is free and devoid of the slightest stirrings of images or thoughts, close to the levels of plants and inanimate objects which are steeped in absolute death. So we know that his understanding of biology is not ours. This is 200 years old, right? When he sees a person sleeping, what does he see a person doing? Lying there. We know that actually sleep performs a lot of things for our bodies. It recharges us, it refuels us. It actually does allow our mind to organize itself. And that a lack of sleep can lead to the disorganization that they are trying to warn us against. That we are not just humps of carbon material waiting to awake the next day. However, when the animal spirit begins to awaken slightly, the process of the passing of thoughts begins to revolve within its imagination, as we have mentioned before. Still, it neither sees, hears, or feels anything that transpires in the world of reality. For the passing thoughts which it has are nothing more than the impressions of things which it experienced while still awake and which are still stamped into its memory. I think he's talking about that like twilight dreamscape kind of experience, right? How many of you have an experience where in the first few moments of waking up, you kept kind of a memory of the dream you were having, but 10 minutes later, it's gone. Right? We are not fully, when we were sleeping, we were not at all engaged in the world. We have kind of the dream sequence, and then we get into the world and we're back into our conscious self. This state is called the dream process, when both the animal and intellectual spirits are powerless to alter it in the least. Can you change your dreams? Can you affect the course of your dream?
Try.
You can try is a good answer.
You can have a level of success if you do it before you fall asleep.
Potentially. But we know that there's not much that we can do about our dreams. However, this is where things get real. When the person becomes fully awake, the nerves become capable of feeling the changes in the real world through the vibrations of their membranes. Which membranes? Our ear membranes, our nose membranes, our fingertip membranes, our tongue membranes, right? These are our senses, our eye membranes. In any event, when the animal spirit is serene and silent with its eyes closed, when the nerves are at rest, the process of passing thoughts is resumed, much like the dream process, with the exception that the intellect's eye has the power to change it at will and direct it so that it is set in a manner which is attuned to the nature of the real world. This state is referred to as the thought process of the small world. What else might we call this thought process of the small world? When we are physically at rest, we are engaged deeply in our mind, and yet our intellect is turned on as well.
Meditation.
Meditation, yeah, I think so. Right, where you're trying to focus our mind's energies. All right. The dream process is completely devoid of any trace of the functions of knowledge and understanding. Do our dreams make sense?
No.
Not often. Sometimes, not often. All that is dreamt is nothing more than a confused agglomeration of false mixed up images. Why is my dog waiting tables? Although thoughts are placed into the memory by the intellectual spirit, the sequence in which they arise stems from the imagination. For the animal spirit lacks the ability and appreciation to be able to set them into an orderly fashion. The intellectual spirit, which has the ability to operate according to fixed rules, can condition the animal spirit to find satisfaction in processes that operate according to a fixed and unchanging schedule. By doing this, it greatly facilitates the management of man's affairs in both worlds, in the small one, the world of thoughts, and the larger one, the world of action. You see where he's going with this? We have some control over the organization of our mind. We have some lack of control over what happens in our mind. And we're going to try to utilize the control that we do have. But we talked about this last week. It's important to know what you can control, what you can influence, and what you can't. Because too frequently we try to influence and control the things that are beyond our control, which, as we learned last week, is a symptom of a lack of patience.
You know, I remember listening to an interview.
Margaret, unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to speak louder.
I remember hearing an interview, I believe he was a composer or somebody wrote something, and talked about he's able to, when you sleep, write things down, go back. Who knows?
I mean, there are a lot of artists who keep a little notebook by their bedside, so that in those first few waking moments, they are able to write things down. Rashida, you're smiling. Do you do that?
This whole conversation is making me think about like creativity,
Mhm.
whereas because you can, in some ways, when you talk about, like you can order the time to maybe be creative as a task, but really it's coming at you and through you at all times. You're almost in that like physical state of kind of dissolving and letting the other stuff come. So it's just interesting. I get that the time this was written, it was far more task oriented, but creativity as a task is also, like for an artist, is
Right.
priority.
I don't think it's a matter of that this was written at a particularly well-organized time. I think that both Franklin and Lefin were pretty obsessive about time in ways that others in their community were not. Right? I think there were plenty of people in the 19th and 18th centuries who had no sense of time whatsoever, just as there are today. And I would, I think Virginia might agree with me that for certain people, the more creative they are, the less time attuned they tend to be. The most creative person I know is one of my longest friends. We've been friends since kindergarten. He's a brilliant artist. And we spent a lot of time in summers together, going to camp together. We were co-counselors together. He was never on time for anything. Could never keep himself to time for anything. I don't think this is inappropriate to share. Where we went to camp, there were shower houses where there would, be multiple people showering at one time, like a locker room kind of a thing. And we weren't allowed to talk to him during shower time, because if we talked to him during shower time, in 10 minutes, we would all be done, and he wouldn't have started yet. Because his mind was just doing the things that his mind did. And we made a rule that if we were trying to get out of the building to go get to somewhere else, you couldn't talk to him during shower time. So be it. Anita,
Going back to the pencil thing. I do that. I have done it for many, many years.
Mhm.
It helps with anxiety during the night, but it
Mhm.
also helps if sometimes you get up in the morning and you have a solution to
Mhm.
something that you could try, and your subconscious continues to
Mhm.
work while you're sleeping.
Right.
But as far as this and our time today and wasting time, I despair because I see the next generation after me, they have a phone in their hand and it's on all the time. And I think it's interfering with the creative
Mhm.
process,
Mhm.
in some ways. I think some creative people will still be totally, creative people tend, when they're in that stage, nothing else exists. And that's why they're frequently late, or, so, yes, creative people will continue and the phone won't distract them, they'll
Right.
but the phone in the hand and trying to have one task at a time, that's impossible.
Anita, I could not agree with you more. This is one of the things that when you talk to people who are sort of efficiency type people, they will say that there are multiple problems to the phone, right? One, the more deeply seated one is the dopamine hit that you get from scrolling and getting new information, and that's where it can suck you in. Which, if you say, I'm gonna spend an hour today scrolling on Instagram, right? Well, you could have set off that time if you wanted to, in the ways that Lefin and Franklin might have suggested. The other problem that I think is more, to your point, Anita, is the notifications. Right, that the ability of our devices to pull our attention to them by blinking and buzzing and beeping, and that is really where, most people that I speak with who are in the realm of teaching people to better manage their time, they will tell you that one of the things that you need to turn off are all of your notifications, right? Email is not time sensitive. Email should not be intruding into your workflow by notifying you there's a new message coming. You should be setting aside a part of your day to be reading and responding to email, not waiting for a thing to blink on your screen that you have a new message. And so you can turn those off.
Okay, yes, you can turn them off, and I frequently don't look at the emails for hours at a time.
Which is fine.
Which is fine for me, and then sometimes I miss a message, and the person says to me, you didn't check your email.
We should not have we should
That's
not have an expectation of fewer than 24 hours response time for an
absolutely.
email, right? But this feeds the beast. Ruth, your hand went up.
Well, I don't know, because I don't know, I'm not from around here, but like keeping the Shabbat where you turn off a lot of things is very, very relaxing.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
not hearing, not
Right.
talking on the phone, other things.
Right.
That helps a lot.
That's
Yeah.
great, unstructured, it'd be interesting to talk about how this idea from Lefin's idea, certainly that plays into the 6 days, but how does it change on Shabbat? Right? But even there are plenty of Orthodox Jews who are Shabbat observant, who for the 6 days carry their phone around and it's beeping and going off. All right, let's move forward. So by doing this, it greatly facilitates the management of man's affairs in both worlds, the small one and the large one. That is the trait of order, allocating a set time for each and every thought and analysis, freeing time and space for each and every affair of the world of action, and demarcating the bounds of each with set boundaries so that one does not intrude upon the other. Because this trait is often beset by many maladies, which must be treated through conditioning, we have seen fit to include it within the 13 traits which need reinforcement. They are admitting that this is not easy. It is not easy to keep your life that structured because we have innate intrusions, right? Our thoughts happen when they happen, right? Our thoughts come into our lives. The trait that we're trying to master is, as I am working on some task, and I am reminded, right, which is this very weird passive voice, I am reminded, meaning my mind had this thought at the same time. I should not move away from task A to process the thing that just popped into my mind about task B. I should finish task A and then go work on task B. Don't pay your credit card bills while you're working on your property taxes.
Are there drafts of this, like, do we have a sense from Lefin, like, what didn't make the list? What was like number 14?
No, not that I know of, not that I know of. Spencer?
He says we. Is that the royal we or like, hey, it's Franklin with me?
No, it's definitely the royal way. It's the royal way.
Just wanted to see if we made a Freudian slip there.
Yeah, no, it's the we, like, you know, when you talk to a podcast goes, you can join us next time. Yeah,
Okay.
we will be speaking at the 92nd Street Y, those kinds of things.
Okay.
I was about to make a gesture to Rihanna, that you probably ask an argue, rather, because she likes to say Lefin rather than Lefin.
We find men who are knowledgeable in Torah, who are wise and possess fine character traits, yet lack order in their household affairs, in their dealings with others, in their studies, or in their prayers. There are some whose household utensils and appurtenances are piled on top of each other or scattered about, clothing, pots, bedding, tubs, and books all in one heap, so that some cannot be found when they are needed, or precious time is wasted searching for them, or their very proximity to each other is damaging. There are people who are engrossed in halachic analysis or making their business accounts while reciting the Amidah.
Okay.
Sir.
There are those who walk with their eyes open in the marketplace but see or hear nothing, sometimes causing damage to themselves or their property, and at least seeming foolish to others. This is the absent-minded professor who's walking around. One should be extraordinarily careful not to allow himself to be confused, and must condition himself to focus all of his attention on what he is doing at that moment. He should not stand in one place and daydream about something totally unrelated, like putting on his tzitzis and reciting the blessings said on film. Spencer?
Are there times when you want to let your mind wander?
Of course.
Do they? I'm not saying they say it specifically, but you could set that as a time.
Yeah. I mean, this is the end of the section on order, but the idea is if you want unstructured time, you can have unstructured time. It just needs to be well structured.
So
You need to set the time of the day, right? From 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, I am going to be daydreaming. I'm going to be meditating. I'm going to be letting my mind wander and reorganize itself. Anita?
When you learn to meditate, you set aside 20 minutes in the morning. Well, I'm talking about most people in the United States. There are other forms of meditation, but the standard one in the United States. You set aside 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. You set yourself up and you try to free your mind. That structured time, when you're doing that, the rest of the time seems to somehow be more ordered.
It's amazing to me how many folks seem to choose that time while they're driving down Glades Road. That's what I seem to experience, is they're just wandering about, or they're on their phone. I mean, I was driving yesterday, I was taking my daughter to dance, and we're driving down Boca Rio, and there was a person who was going 5 miles under the speed limit and sort of wandering across the one lane. And of course, when we get to the place where the road forks, and I've looked at them, they have their body turned 45 degrees, and they've got their phone out like this. And of course, so I ask you to do your meditation not while operating heavy machinery.
So you were the guy behind me on the road.
Wasn't you, Spencer? I would have let you know. So this is order. Remember, this is aspirational.
Yes.
We struggle with this in my household on multiple fronts for 2 very important reasons. One, we have not done a good job of helping our kids develop a sense of orderliness in their way of thinking things, but it's also because we have handicapped them in the process. Because we have way too much stuff. It is very, very hard to keep yourself ordered when you have too many things. Either too many possessions or too many things to do. The reason why we have so many things in our houses, or the reason why our stuff seems to be overflowing, is because it is. There isn't enough place to put it all. And our answer is to seem to buy more boxes, which just makes more room for more stuff, which is the challenge. I was listening to a thing yesterday, completely devoid of this whole conversation, but it was a conversation about the global economy and toys. And how in generations, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, most people had a very, very small number of toys because toys were quite expensive. Nowadays, children have dozens and dozens and dozens of toys, which are made cheaply and cost very little. And so buying another toy and another toy and another toy just is not a big thing. And we have so much stuff.
Trump is nostalgic.
Yes.
I am not making a political commentary. I'm just saying that the number of things in people's homes today are by a factor as they were a generation or two ago. And for the benefit of Franklin and Lefin, they lived in an era when people didn't have that much stuff. And so having things organized, even that one book and that one pot and that one bed and that one sheet, even then it was important to keep it organized. How much more the more so now when we've got too much stuff? We have way too many towels in my house.
I knew.
Beach towels and bath towels and phantom.
I knew a woman
You never.
that she only kept 4 cups and saucers.
That's
She
right.
got more stuff, and she had a family. I was fascinated.
There was a trick that I learned when I was in college, not at my school, but at a different school. One of the fraternity houses had a problem because everyone was leaving dirty dishes in the sink and no one was cleaning them. So what did they do? They issued every person who lived in that house 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 knife, 1 spoon, and 1 cup. That's all you got. If you wanted to clean dishware, you had to keep your dish clean. It worked. It worked.
Sure.
Yeah.
I thought they were just gonna have paper plates and styrofoam.
Waste, no. That's the easy non-Mussar solution, is to buy more disposables.
Oh, I know, but it's a frat house.
All right, moving away from order and into tzedek, justice, righteousness.
It's a good one.
It's a good one.
Absolutely.
Franklin says, wrong none by doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. Lefin says, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor.
Can you repeat that?
Heard that.
Sure. Franklin says, wrong none by doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. Lefin says, what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. Is that the goal? So Bob says, is that the golden rule? The answer is yes, it is the Jewish iteration of the golden rule. And I mean that with sincerity. That I know personally of 3 different iterations that are well known of the golden rule. Most people, when you say what is the golden rule, it's do unto others as you would have done unto you, right? That is a positive framing of it, which says you should only do things that you would want people to do to you. That is typically ascribed to Christianity and its iteration. Nothing wrong with it, by the way. There's nothing inherently bad about Christian wisdom. It's just that's the community that it comes from. Lefin is reminding us of a teaching that comes from our tradition, from our Talmud, right? There is a story in the Talmud where Rabbi Hillel is in conversation with a Roman general. And the general challenges Hillel to teach him the entire Torah while standing on 1 foot. And Hillel's answer is, that which is hateful to you, do not do to any others. The rest is commentary. Now go and study it. And he did it while all standing on 1 foot. But that was our iteration, right? But I think that we can spend a lot of time talking about this, the difference between framing it in the positive, only do things that you want others to do to you, versus the negative, which is just don't do the things that you wouldn't want done to you. I'm not sure which one is greater, which one is smaller. I actually think that the Jewish iteration is easier to follow and to fulfill. The third iteration is one that comes from an era right after Franklin and Lefin, actually. And it's usually ascribed to the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, whose iteration goes something like this. It's a lot more convoluted, especially in German. When you are considering whether or not to perform an action, you should ask yourself, what is the axiom that is underlying this action? What is the general ethical principle that is underlying this action? And if you would presume to make that ethical axiom a universal ethical axiom, then you should do the act. If the ethics of what you're doing is something that you think that everyone should follow, then you should do it.
That's the same thing.
I believe it is. But Mark and I'm happy to debate.
Because, I mean, you could have not to get into today's politics.
Don't.
You could have somebody leaning you to a path that's really not kind,
Mm-hmm.
but if you see it, if this is what you think you should do, and that's it. We should have others do it too.
Well, I think the question would be, if you know an act to be generally unkind, but beneficial to yourself, is that decision-making process, the decision-making process you would want everyone to follow?
Depends who it is.
Well, the idea is, if it depends who it is, then it's not an axiom to be followed, right? A later philosophical principle that was introduced by the Harvard philosopher, 20th century philosopher John Rawls, suggested the idea of the veil of ignorance. And his idea was that, and he was talking more at the societal level, which is when you are creating rules for a society, you should create them from behind the veil of ignorance, meaning you don't know what your place in that society will be. You don't know if you're going to be the richer or the poor. You don't know the color of your skin or your gender. You are just being asked to create rules for society. And his presumption is that if we create rules of society from behind the veil of ignorance, we will create rules that lead to the most levels of justice. Right, by the way, the name of his book was called A Theory of Justice. With the most justice and equality for everybody, right? Said more simply, there is cake behind me on the table. Somebody made the cake and somebody cut up the cake. If there was one piece of cake that was left and I was to be sharing it with one other person, the veil of ignorance principle would suggest that whichever person does not cut the cake gets to choose which piece they want. So that when I, the cake cutter, know that it's the other person who's choosing the piece of the cake, what will I strive to do in my cutting of the cake? Make the cake as equal as possible. Thank you. Spencer.
I like what you said about how the Jewish one seems easier. And the reason I liked it is because I feel like universally applied.
I didn't say easier, I think I said simpler.
Simpler,
And
yeah.
I mean that they should both be easy, frankly. Right? It's easy not to hurt people. It's easy to benefit people. But I think it's simpler because, and I believe this in my core, most people are presented with opportunities to hurt other people less frequently than they're presented with opportunities to enhance their lives. And I think it's more clear that this is going to hurt this person, rather than this is going to benefit the person. And even more so, I know more clearly that this would hurt me, and therefore know not to do it to somebody else, then I might wonder, is this going to benefit me or not?
That's
I
true.
liked what you said, because I feel like applying universally is saying, well, everyone has to do the same thing if we're all gonna do it, or something, and that seems very broad and difficult and hard to live by. I feel like saying only do good things for other people is also hard to live by.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to do your job, you're a cop, you have to give a ticket. You're an HR employee, you have to fire people.
By the way, when it says do unto others as you would have done unto you, if you believe that everyone should get tickets for speeding, the police officer isn't doing anything wrong. Right? If we set a rule that says that we're gonna have speed limits that we're gonna follow, and that you're gonna get a ticket for breaking the rules, A theory of justice would say that getting that ticket, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way we designed our society. Not giving the ticket might be problematic.
You need to talk to the Supreme Court.
I wanted to sit on the Supreme Court when I was 17.
I kind of like that, you're pretty smart,
I appreciate that.
more than pretty smart.
There's a difference in the way people look at life.
Mm-hmm,
Judaism looks at life in a certain
mm-hmm.
way. From the time we're born, we're taught this. So throughout our lives, we look to do mitzvahs.
Yeah.
We're looking.
More of which are, by the way, are prohibitions than exhortations. There are more things the Torah tells us not to do than Torah tells us to do.
Okay.
Yeah. 365 to 248, that's the score. Right.
Like a
One
ball
thing
game.
for every idiot.
But this is the way our minds are set.
Yeah. What's interesting to Anita's point is Franklin agrees. Franklin, who was not Jewish, right, very easily could have framed his justice and righteousness under the idea of the golden rule, which is do for others what you want them to do to you. But he actually uses our wisdom and frames it in the negative.
Okay, can I ask you something? Could you, I'm sure you wrote this, could you give us the actual translation of that phrase in the Ten Commandments?
It's not in the Ten Commandments.
Oh.
It's in the Talmud. I'd have to look it up. I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm curious as to whether or not the translation is accurate.
I'm happy to do that at 101 when we're done. Moving on, I will come back to this answer. All right. So we have already explained that, and this is before we have this for you, that self-adoration was implanted by God within the animal spirit for the good of the world, right? We adore ourselves. We have a sense of self-preservation. That is not a terrible thing to have, right? God did, I think this was in the Patience, like God wants us to take care of ourselves. That's important. However, since the animal spirit is always compelled, but never commanded, it can only seek its own satisfaction, right? An animal spirit committed to self-adoration without limit can be dangerous because it is not wired to consider other people's needs, just its own. The intellectual soul, on the other hand, is commanded to fulfill the will of its creator, to do good for all that was created. And he is especially commanded to benefit man who is God's treasure, for he was made in God's image, right? So our spiritual, intellectual side, we try to take care of all creation, maybe even putting ourselves at risk, right? The intellectual soul needs the reminder, put your own mask on first, right? There's a lot of these binaries, a lot of these tension dynamics in our tradition, right? My favorite is the one that's taught us by Rabbi Simcha Bunim, which says that we should walk around with two pieces of paper in our pockets. One of which says, I am but dust and ashes, and one of which says the whole world was created for me. You see that in here as well. We have the animal side, the intellectual side. The world was created for me, that's the animal spirits. I am but dust and ashes, that's the intellectual side. We carry them both, we need them both. We are unfit without either one. This is even more applicable to those who believe in he who created the heavens and the earth, who are embarrassed for they have to accept the bread of shame, the sustenance that he grants, even though we are not worthy, which leads them to be ashamed. Who am I to have received the blessing of being born? Right? I'm thinking of another contemporary to this generation as articulated by Lin-Manuel Miranda, Hamilton, how lucky we are to be alive right now. Right? Which of course we look back 200 years later and say, they weren't that lucky. The world was miserable in the late 1800s.
Time in America to be a leader.
It was a great time to be, it's always a great time to be a leader in America, let's be honest.
No.
Yeah,
That
it
was
is.
a special time.
Compared to everybody else, it's always better to be a leader.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
but I mean, I could be a leader now or then, I choose that.
And who are merciful to those who require public assistance and are embarrassed by their need, right? The intellectual person is embarrassed that there is want and need. We are embarrassed for the person who is in need, and we are embarrassed for our society that we have people who are in need. It is befitting that one exercise chesed, loving kindness, and bond himself to the attributes of God by emulating the divine trait of extending loving kindness to his fellow man, in particular to love all who believe in God. For he was obligated by God to love your neighbor as yourself, in an obligation which our sages characterize as being the foundation of the entire Torah.
Is that why Hello was able to say,
Yes, right. The reason why we don't do to others what we wouldn't want done to us is out of what emotional state? Love. I don't hurt my neighbor. Why?
they wouldn't want them to do it?
Because I love them. Because we are committed to love our neighbor. And if everybody in humanity sees their fellow human beings as their neighbor whom they love, then it's very easy to fulfill the idea that we should not harm those others and do to them what we wouldn't want them to do to us. This is the Torah foundation for the Talmudic teaching that Hillel shared with us. By the way, it's also the foundation of this congregation.
Wait, I don't,
Love is the primary emotional state of this congregation. When you walk into our building, what is the first thing you are greeted with when you walk into the Welcome Center? Tapestries of love. The mission of the synagogue is to build bonds of love. It's in our mission statement. Right out of here. Right out of here. Elsewhere, we are taught in Makot, in Talmud, Habakkuk came and condensed them, the precepts, into one. As it says in Habakkuk, the righteous live because of their trustworthiness. Midrash Mishle explains, a man who is trustworthy has many blessings, but he who makes haste to accumulate wealth will not be cleansed of sin. If one conducts his business dealings in good faith, his possessions will increase and God will make his livelihood readily available. For men who trust him because of his good faith, and their money will always be deposited with him. If you are honest, if you are trustworthy, if you do honest dealings in business, this says that theologically, you will live a well-compensated life because you will have more people to do business with because they will trust you. And a fool and his money are soon separated.
That's right.
Haste makes waste, says Franklin, and early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Or as there's a wonderful book from the last century, Get Rich Slowly.
there's actually a book called Get Rich Slowly.
It's called Get Rich Slowly.
Ain't good.
It is. Invest in the long-term stock market. Don't play the stocks. Just play the long game and you'll get rich slowly.
Let me get that book.
Good book. Moreover, not only does he earn his livelihood because he is trustworthy, he is called a tzaddik as well. Tzaddik is a what? A righteous person, right? But of course, tzaddik, tzedek, the other word for righteousness is justice. In other words, what is the primary way we evaluate someone's righteousness? If they act with justice, if they act fairly, if they treat people fairly, and if it stems from a place of love, that is tzaddik. As it says in Habakkuk, tzaddik lives because of their trustworthiness. Another chapter, it says, Or zaru'alat tzaddik, light is sown for the righteous. Uyishrei lev, and for those of straight heart, simcha, joy, comes from the Psalms. Great teachings.
Job.
Job is the problem.
Yes, Job is the problem.
Another verse in Vayikra, it says, in Leviticus, it says, and these are the things which man shall do and live by them. By the way, this is the middle of the Torah. Chapter 18, chapter 19, chapter 20 of the book of Leviticus is the geographic center of the Torah. Meaning if you unroll the whole thing, it's right in the middle. Chapter 19, which we read a moment ago, That's the holiness code. This is how you be a good person. It's right there, right in the heart of Torah. The sages explained, great is the Torah, for it provides life to he who fulfills it. And in this world and the world to come. It is true that in our times, we do not know all of the Torah that can be seen as being condensed with this precept of living with righteousness. Just as we lack the ability to answer the questions of the Yetzer Hara, why are we tempted to do evil things? Or nations regarding the reasons for the proscription of shatnez, or of the para aduma, of the red heifer. Why do we make mistakes? Because we do. We don't totally understand why, but we do. We know the temptation to do wrong is a part of the human condition. So we have to cultivate these tasks, these traits. Notwithstanding this lack of knowledge, we do know that it is this discipline to live righteously obligates in a number of precepts which are in the area of interpersonal relationships, like avoiding robbery, theft, taking advantage, cheating, jealousy, hatred, or informing.
Informing? That's in the Torah?
Stitches get stitches.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
That's in the Torah?
So the informing on your fellow human to, especially, and again, this probably has to do with in Jewish and out Jewish informing. If you report a Jew to the Romans,
Oh,
for shame, right? When you see someone doing something wrong, you do have an obligation. We have an obligation to tochacha, to rebuke, to tell them they are doing wrong. Not to tattle, but to tell. You tell them themselves. Yeah. By the way, all this is in which collection? Robbery, theft, taking advantage, cheating, jealousy. Where do we find all of that? In the Ten Commandments. Right. What I love about this, and it tickled me.
Where's Lashon Hara? I'm sorry.
So Lashon Hara is,
Everything, you can't do this.
so what does Lashon Hara mean?
Bad, well, technically, bad speech.
Bad speech, right? So gossiping, speaking badly of other people behind their back, comes from a variety of places. It's mostly rabbinic unless like a direct, like you shall not commit Lashon Hara. Like it's not iterated that way. And the way we're told, don't steal, don't commit adultery, like it's a little bit different.
But some people don't think that's like high on the list. They think of stealing, but they don't realize that, you know, he always gets mad at me because if he starts saying something, I say, I don't want to hear Lashon Hara.
Well, one of the examples that the Talmud often refers to is when Miriam was stricken with tzara'at because she was speaking ill of Moses' wife. And for that, she was stricken. And that's one of the proof texts for the rabbinic prohibition against Lashon Hara. What I like about this particular text is, listen, we don't always understand all of these things, but it seems like you can kind of distill this or boil this down into some pretty simple teachings, like act with justice and righteousness. How many of you were fans of George Carlin when he was doing his comedy, when he was still alive?
Who's George Carlin?
He was a comedian. He was a 20th century comedian. One of his most famous bits was on the 7 words you can't say on television, which I certainly can't say in this room right now, any of them. However, he had another bit that was about the 10 Commandments. And his point was, always being honest and faithful is kind of a way that you can distill the entirety of the 10 Commandments. That all of them have to do with this simple idea of acting with honesty and with faithfulness. He does it a lot funnier than that. And he takes you through all how each one can be framed in that way. He struggles with murder, but all the other ones, I encourage you to try to find, it's on YouTube, it's easy to find, George Carlin 10 Commandments, you'll get a good chuckle out of it. I will give you a little bit of a warning. There is some sexual humor in it. You have to be comfortable with that to listen to it, but I'll leave it at that. Stuff is good too, right? Let more order, less stuff. Moreover, this obligation also includes the positive precept of performing acts of loving kindness. I want to remind everybody that in the Mussar tradition, acts of loving kindness is not simply being nice to people. It is going out of your way to be nice to people. It is putting yourself out for the benefit of others. That's how you fulfill this precept of performing acts of loving kindness. Tosafot Yom Tov, and a response to Pirkei Avot, says that man must fulfill God's will. And Rabbi Akiva says this applies to all men and women, all the children of Noah, not just to Jews. All who accept the 7 Noahide laws are careful to fulfill them and are considered to be the righteous of the nations and have a share in the world to come. Right? Is anyone here not familiar with the Noahide laws and the idea of it? Is this new to anybody? All right, so the idea of the Noahide laws, and I don't know all off the top of my head, it's a Talmudic discussion, and we'll end here, that answers the question, all right, we know what our expectations of Jews are. That's the entire Torah. But how do we evaluate the righteousness of people who are not Jewish? And the answer the rabbis give is that after the flood, when God promised not to flood the earth again, God gave 7 rules, basic rules, like don't murder, don't steal, these very same rules. And that the way that a Jew can evaluate the righteousness of anyone who is not Jewish is if they fulfill those 7 Noahide laws. If they fulfill those 7 Noahide laws, then they are a righteous person that we should feel good about. Because people who are not Jewish are not expected to follow our laws like Shabbat and those kinds of things. With that, happy birthday again to Spencer. Moedim l'simcha, Dagim, Uzmanim, l'sason. I will see many of you this Friday evening for Shabbat services. There is Yizkor Saturday morning at 10:30 after Torah study. There is, we will be meeting next Tuesday, will be our final conversation about Franklin and Lefin. There was not a session the last week in April, on April the 29th, on that Tuesday, I believe. I'm gonna